Why was Florida State's Mike Norvell yelling into the microphone at ACC Media Days?
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football writer and recruiting analyst. Thank you for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. Today, we're going to be discussing the unusual nature of Mike Norvell's press conference from ACC Media Days. I have my own takes on it, but it is one of the more odd situations that I've seen from a guy that is normally extremely positive. But I think there are a couple of reasons why. We'll dive into that. We're also going to talk about one of the things that Norvell, as well as Nole fans, should all know. The offensive line has to be much better this year, and they're certainly going to be under fire in game one. Alabama comes to Tallahassee. That's not exactly an ease into the season. That's big boy football right off the bat. So we're going to look at the overall thought process on how this line has been put together, the changes, and a comment from Richie Leonard that I thought was very good news. So let's start with the Norvell situation. Mike has been pretty much about as close to a gentleman by coach standards as anybody in college football over the last 5-6 years. Even back to his time at Memphis, etc. He's never been a guy that was mean-spirited. He's never been a guy that really went after reporters. He's not Nick Saban-esque, for lack of a better phrase. But for whatever the reason, Mike Norvell had a point to make during ACC Media Days. As I began to watch it, we get to just under the 2-minute mark, minute 40, minute 45, something like that into the podcast I was watching on YouTube. And he starts getting a little bit more animated, not a lot, but his voice just went up a couple of notches, not like one, but like a couple of notches. He's right in front of the microphone, as you should be at the podium, but anything that was asked of him, he's loud. He was that way for about 5 minutes. He was very defensive in nature, like it's almost like his blood pressure just suddenly went up. And most of the questions were about as standard as they could get. In my opinion, I don't think there was anything that was asked of Norvell that was out of the ordinary. And yet he was still very defensive. Now, I'm literally not going to go into the specifics because I think it's best for people to go watch it themselves, but just go to YouTube or whatever you want to use for finding it. Go look at the first 5-10 minutes of Norvell's press conference from ACC Media Days. You have to see it for yourself to fully understand, but I'm going to give a couple of points on why I think he was, at least it seems to be, somewhat agitated. Number one, and he even said this in the press conference, it's been a long offseason. He's right. You've got a whole bunch of new coaches. He got rid of guys that I think personally, I'll never know for sure, but personally, he was told they have to go. One thing I know is college coaches don't like firing other people in the industry. As I understand that. That's the unfortunate nature of business, but it happened. Probably still bothers Mike Norvell. It is what it is. He also mentioned the mass number of players leaving the program and those coming into the program. Technically, again, that's true. Was he ticked about it because he's mad at himself? Or is he mad about the fact that so many people brought that up, though? That's something that I've talked about. War Chant, Noles 24/7, the Rivals, Osceola, like all the different sites. And then, of course, Tallahassee Democrat and all the newspapers, Jacksonville Times, etc. They've all talked about Norvell and the roster changes, too many portal guys, etc. I'm probably first on the list. But he seemed to be a little bit irritated by it to a certain degree. Okay. But it's still true. Like, it's very difficult to flip a roster and then be good again that next year. But flipping a roster after 2-10, I don't know what else you were going to do. So it is what it is. Maybe I'm reading too much into that. But again, watch the press conference for yourself. I can only explain it so much. One's eyes, more importantly, one's ears more important, with Norvell's ACC Media Day press conference. Also, talking about Thomas Castellanos, the comments that Thomas made a few weeks back about Bama, and he more or less doubled down at ACC Media Days for whatever that's worth. I'm not going to really delve into that today, perhaps tomorrow or this weekend, but he defended it, and he said Thomas is a good guy, etc. So he went to a more even keel for a little bit. And the other part, this is what's really interesting. There was somebody that asked a 2-part question that was long. It took a lot of thinking about what this guy wants. And Norvell was back in his normal self, just like a light switch. It was really unusual to see basic tone coming out, get into the press conference just a little bit, and he starts raising his voice, answering questions with a high voice. It was very unusual. And then he went back down. I would love to know what the lows and highs of that were about. I can only speculate like I was just doing, but I think there is one overall theme here. He's starting to feel pressure. He doesn't like being, at least as much as he has, hearing that Florida State football is down, and he kept talking about competing for championships. We have a standard. All those things are coach speak, but true. But he was agitated the whole time he did it. So here's my question for Florida State fans. And again, I'm telling you, go watch the press conference for yourself. Tell me what you think. But do you believe that it's because he's A, embarrassed, B, just tired of the media like me complaining? Is it the fans complaining? Is there not enough respect from like the ACC media for Florida State when he was at ACC Media Days? Is it something else? Comment down below, because I don't really know what the answer is that was the final tipping point. But something happened. Like if you watch that video, you're going to notice like, okay, why are you yelling into the microphone? This is unusual. This is strange. So he's a little bit on the agitated side, but here's the other part of it. I'd rather he be upset, agitated, whatever word you want, whether it's strange or not that he was yelling into the microphone, as opposed to it's just another year. Because the first time that a head coach at any program, Florida State or otherwise, feels that it's just another year, it's just another ACC Media Day or Big Ten Media Day, Pac-12, Big 12, SEC, whatever, that's usually their last year at that school. It's got to mean something. Every little thing has to mean something. So while, again, I believe it's a strange way to operate at a media day, I would rather Norvell be a little more energetic and uncomfortable, if you will, with what happened last year as they get ready for fall camp. By the way, fall camp is next Wednesday. That is the first day of practice for the Florida State Seminoles. So we're literally 6 days away as I do this podcast. So not very far away at all. When we come back, I'm going to stay with the theme of what Norvell was agitated about, but we're going to put it in a broader perspective, something that he has every right to be mad about if he wanted, but seems to be trending in the right direction based on his comments. And we're also going to talk about Richie Leonard's comments, talking about the transfers in to play offensive line, the battles. That is very interesting because Alabama's got a lot of talent. So let's talk about that next here on Locked On Seminoles. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every moment even more exciting. You're always following the action, but why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can take it every single day a little bit differently and enjoy it with your friends. If you have the opportunity to get on there, you're going to have some fun with it. So with FanDuel, for me, there's a couple of things. Number one, all the football action for preseason over-under win totals. Those are pretty straightforward. Quarterbacks. How many people don't follow quarterbacks if you watch football? Which guys in the ACC, college football, etc., may or may not win the Heisman? And then, of course, we got the MLB playoff race kind of getting to the point where it's really important. We're almost to August. There's plenty there to watch as well. If you're new to FanDuel, new customers get $5 down. And if you win, $150 in bonus bets come your way. Just check out FanDuel.com to get started. Thank you once again for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. It's a lot of fun right now because of the media days, all the anticipation. I'm going to give my ACC picks either Friday or Saturday in the next couple of days. I'll probably do some kind of podcast pretty much every day now between now and the end of the football season. There's something that I can get in for 10 minutes. We're going to have a lot of podcasts, but I think this next section is going to determine a lot of how much fun those pods are going to be. This may be the most important segment of the year 2025 here on Locked On Seminoles. How good will the offensive line be? It's a great question. And War Chant and everybody else digging into the questions and everything with Norvell at Media Days. One thing that I found just going through different articles about Florida State that was interesting, and Richie Leonard, he went out of the lineup game 4, I believe it was last year for Florida State. So he gets to come back, the transfer from Florida. It's really interesting the comment he had. And I want to get to that in a second, but here's what Norvell said about some of the players coming in and what's going on with the work. He says, you can see just in those guys, the way they're communicating, the way they're working with each other, the extra work that they're putting in from the technique and the fundamentals. And the good thing is we've got guys in that group that have played a lot of football. He's 100% right about that last part, especially. All the guys up front for Florida State are transfers this year, which is bizarre, but they're all veterans. They're all in at least their 4th year of football. It may not work chemistry-wise. We'll see. The transfer portal is certainly a high-risk, high-reward deal, but you're not going to blame Florida State for inexperience. That's for sure. Richie Leonard will be one. They've got like Pettis and all those guys, Pettibone, all those guys up front they brought in, Medley, etc. I don't know which one will end up being the best, but what I'm concerned about, and please comment down below on this as well, how well do you think it will gel? To my knowledge, I haven't heard otherwise, they're all going to be ready for next Wednesday's practice, and they need every single rep they can get, A, because you're playing Bama, but B, some of them were banged up. Like Pettis was banged up in spring. If that line solidifies with Thomas Castellanos running around back there and his big arm, Florida State's offense could be explosive. It could be one of the biggest flips from one year to the next you've ever seen. But I really don't know. And I don't think anybody else does. But I like the comment that he talked about Norvell with the fundamentals and that stuff, because O-line's probably the most technical position on the field. And I like the fact that he just brought up the obvious. It is an experience kind of deal because every one of them is going to be in at least their 4th year of college football. Now, here's Leonard's comment. The guys that we brought in are all great guys. They've all gelled. That's a really key word with the line. Right in with everybody, with the young guys. They've been phenomenal. Now, veteran players go to media days because coaches know they're not going to make a bunch of stupid comments. That's fine. But Richie doesn't really know these guys, and he's giving them not just like, okay, they've done nice. Like, he gave them kudos. He gave them applause. He didn't have to go that far. Maybe it's just me, but I think that's a pretty good sign. It's the most important position for Florida State, not just to improve, but like triumphantly improve. They need to find a way to take a massive leap forward. There's no way Florida State should have been in the spot they were last year at a bunch of positions, but the offensive line was just embarrassing. So you bring in 4 more guys, and Richie was here last year. You bring in Herb Hand, Malzahn, who they're buddies, as the new play caller. Is it unfair to ask for Florida State football to be consistent up front this year? I don't think so. Again, I know the chemistry is a little iffy, but with that, here's a question that I have on the offensive line. I got a few, actually. These are just kind of fun. Take these any way you want, but these are the questions I have. Answer them as you see fit. Will Florida State rush for 200 yards? I did the same question here on Locked On Seminoles a while back, and I said 180. I'm up in the ante because Malzahn's offenses typically go over 200 yards on the ground. It's got a mobile quarterback, so it's a little different deal than most schools, but no offense to the ACC. I just don't think it's that good in the trenches. Miami, Clemson aside, those two have a lot of really good D linemen. NC State's pretty well coached up front. Okay. But how many teams have depth? Louisville to a certain degree, but they take a lot of transfers as well. Who else? Do you really think Georgia Tech or Syracuse or Virginia Tech, Virginia, any of these schools are going to bring D linemen in waves? Florida State should be able to run the ball even with the contingent of transfers. And again, all 5 of the guys that are expected to start are transfers. That is unusual. But with the ridiculous amount of talent Florida State has at running back and a super mobile quarterback in Thomas Castellanos, I think 200 yards is achievable. Question 2. Over under. Florida State allows 20 sacks in 2025. I'm a little bit on the fence with this one because while Thomas Castellanos will get himself out of trouble with his athleticism, sometimes he'll get himself into trouble too. So that number is a little bit subjective, but is it plausible in jest that Florida State gets under the 20 mark? I think that's very plausible, but that's a chemistry issue. And for it to happen, they're going to need the offensive line to have played together pretty much all the way through fall. I mean, they just can't afford any injuries in fall camp. And at the same time, this is where it gets touchy. They need to hit more than most teams do because a lot of them haven't played together. And like Pettis was banged up in spring. They need every single first team rep, that is possible. We'll see if that works out. We come back. I got a couple more questions, and then I have some thoughts on the Alabama game. That is next here on Locked on Seminoles. All right, let's talk a little bit more on a couple questions about the offensive line for Florida State. How consistent will they be from game to game? This was one of my biggest pet peeves about Florida State last year. Let's look at the Cal game and just use the defense for an example. Late in the game, Cal drove the football. They've got Mendoza's a good quarterback, got a couple really good skill guys at receiver, running back. But Florida State bowed up. They bowed up. The offensive line was terrible all year, so the defense had to have those moments. But the defensive line was super talented, and they weren't always that way. Now it's the situation's kind of flipped where they lose some guys off the defense, like Farmer, but they're still really talented. Obviously, Big Darryl at nose guard. Got Williams come in. They got some other really talented transfers. We'll see how the defense does. But especially in fall camp, that's a lot of size. That's a lot of experience. The O-line should be prepared. They're going against grown men in practice. It's going to help. It's one of the reasons that Florida State's O-lines in the 90s, they weren't always full NFL guys, but they'd have 1 or 2 that were pretty darn likely to in the NFL. Going against that D-line every day in practice, it was ridiculous what they had in the 90s. You knew you were going to get better or you just get your butt kicked. This group is going to be similar. I think Florida State's D-line is going to be really good, and it should help them be consistent. But will they? Because it's not just the physical, it's the mental. I'm actually more concerned about the games against teams that aren't, quote unquote, as talented. Virginia Tech, for instance. NC State. Teams that have good talent, but not necessarily the Miami, Clemson, Florida State level that's expected. How does Florida State's O-line play there? With veterans, you should expect Florida State to have guys that come in with a lunch pail attitude week in and week out. That's the expectation. But last year's unit was so bad, I don't even know what to put into perspective there. But are they going to be ready week in and week out? That's a big one. Comment down below if you have a thought on that. And then finally, this is kind of self-explanatory, really. Are they clutch? If you're down 3 with 3 minutes to go and you get the ball at your 7-yard line, that's not fun. But that's the task at hand. Are you clutch? Tommy's not going to just sit back there and go through a 12-play drive from the pocket, running around a little bit here and there, but just sitting from the pocket, it's not going to happen. You're going to have to adjust to him. He's hard to block for in obvious passing situations. And if they ask him, did you drop backs over and over? You got to not just block well. He's about 5'11", something like that. You need to give him throwing lanes, throwing windows in the most difficult situations. Will Florida State's O-line be good enough to do that in those clutch, 3rd and 6? Not a good situation. Like at your own 11-yard line with 2.5 minutes to go, 3rd and 6. If you don't get that first down, you're done. You got to give Thomas time. That kind of situation. I'm really curious about that with the offensive line. If it goes well, Florida State could advance and possibly end up being one of the better offenses in the ACC. A lot of it's going to have to do with the O-line. Then finally with this, let's just hope, this is just an added-in point. They still have some talent behind, don't get me wrong, but it's very inexperienced. They need a little bit of luck with the injuries. Finally, in conjunction with what I started the show today, and maybe this is another reason Norvell was yelling into the microphone, how well will Florida State players and coaches handle the Bama pressure with all the press conferences after practices during fall camp? When you're on camera, there's nowhere to hide. I don't know if Norvell will get agitated like that again, or at least it was almost like he just got done being punched or something. He was just upset, like his voice was raised. Are they going to be able to handle that pressure and use the pressure, like all the questions about playing Bama and all that, in a motivating way? Maybe it's lashing out a little bit too, but can they do it in a manner that is going to actually benefit them throughout fall camp? I don't know the answer to that. I have no idea. All the new players, especially up front on the offensive line, again, you got 5 transfers in total, 4 of which are coming in for this year. I don't know. FSU is not a difficult team to understand what they're trying to do. Both their coordinators that came in, they've run very successful schemes. Other teams are going to know. But you got to be able to not only implement that, but for Bama, you got to have some wrinkles, like every little detail. And mentally being dialed in, that's going to be important because Kalen DeBoer's offense is not fun. He's got Grubbs coming back with him. He was with the Seahawks last year, so they got their OC from the Washington days back. That's going to be an interesting offense to prepare for, and then defensively, it's just raw talent. They might have the best secondary in college football. Florida State needs to be ready mentally, and part of that is handling the media with all the questions about the things I just mentioned, among others. If they are not ready for all that attention, it's going to be a long, long August because that game is not until August 30th, and it is not going to be easy at all for Florida State to just dodge around that because the same questions are going to come over and over again. How do you handle Bama's front? How do you handle all the speed Bama had, like Ryan Williams? It's going to be the same questions over and over again, but it's something to think about. Finally, how do the players handle it in conjunction with Norvell? Are they going to take the same vibe that he did at media days, or is it going to be more calm? I'm kind of curious about that. I don't know how much it matters, but I think it's interesting because reading body language, you can sometimes tell if people are feeling the pressure. Florida State has a lot of talent that's unproven, all these new guys. It could be a variety pack of different attitudes at these press conferences, but it's something that I've looked at for years when evaluating coaches and players. How do you handle not just the really difficult questions, but do you give everybody the same level of attention? Are you giving poignant answers? And what's your body language like while you're giving it? I think that'll be something interesting as we get closer to Bama week. Thank you once again for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Please like and subscribe, and we will see you again soon on Locked On Seminoles.